Hi, good evening, everyone. I hope I'm audible and my screen is visible. So, once I get a confirmation that everything is okay, then we can start with the session today. So, today's session is on reading comprehension. That's basically the daily drill that we'll be discussing today. So, once I get a go ahead, I think we should be good to. Yeah, I hope everything is working fine. I'll just check the video once. Yeah, everything seems to be okay. All right. So, I'll just start it on my phone as well so that I can have a look at the comments that all you wonderful people would be sharing today. So just let me log in as well and then we can start. All right, perfect. All right, so we are good to go. So today's session, of course, is going to be on reading comprehension. That's the daily drill. I hope some of you have taken the test. So from what I figured out, a lot of you have taken the test today comparatively. So I hope that all of you who are present here today for this session have also looked at the test once and have looked at the questions because that will make your life slightly easier. I'm not saying that if you haven't seen the test, you will not be able to derive benefit from the session, but it will make your life slightly easier. All right. So what we will do is we will have two RCs today, two reading comprehension passages. Both of them are manageable passages, not very difficult passages per se. But then again, some of the questions are like pretty tricky. So out of the 11 questions that we have today, 6 plus 5, I think around two or three questions are like properly tricky. Otherwise, the questions are fine. So mostly you should be able to answer them correctly. And ideally, you should get some six or seven correct at least if you have attempted all 11 questions in 20 minutes. But we will see what exactly would have happened and how exactly could you have answered the questions better. So what I'll do is I'll just flash the passage once and I'll show you what the passage is about, and I'll give you maybe 2-3 minutes to get a head start. Those of you who want to pause the video can pause the video, have a look at the questions and then try it out on your own. And maybe at a later point in time, if you feel that there is something that you need help with, something that you don't believe in, then definitely let me know in the chat and I'll try to address those questions then and there. Okay, so let's start with the first passage. So the first passage is about this. So the first couple of paragraphs are right in front of you. The end of the age of the internal combustion engine is in sight, and some of it reflects the remarkable abilities of Elon Musk. So I'm sure you have heard the name. This is an old cat passage. So back then, Elon Musk had not really started out, but he was not as popular as, or maybe right. So that is basically the context. That's why you will see something which you might feel that it's over explaining, right? But that is basically the context. Now this is basically the first couple of paragraphs. Then you have the next bit. This last may be the most important factor in the story. The private car is a device of immense practical help. So that is the paragraph. The sleek and swift electric car is at one level merely the most contemporary, and so on and so forth. And there are some things that have been given to you. You can have a look at these. And the dream goes further than that. The electric cars of the future will be so thoroughly equipped with sensors and so on. And this is the future towards which Uber is working till we'll all have to take to electrically powered bicycles. Right. And I'll show you the six questions that are there. So first question is this: which of the following statements best reflects the author's argument? And you have four options, as is the case normally. Question number two is the author points out all of the following about electric cars except. So everything except this thing has been mentioned in the passage. Question number three, according to the author, the main reason for Tesla's remarkable sales is that. So what is the reason behind Tesla's sales? The author comes to the conclusion that car drivers will no longer own cars and so on and so on and so on. So that is the question, the fifth question. And the sixth question, I believe, in paragraphs 5 and 6, the author provides the example of Uber to argue that, right? So that is the fifth question of the passage. And this is the sixth one. In paragraph 6, the author mentions electrically powered bicycles to argue that, and that I believe is the last question of the passage. Right. So there are six questions that are there, 3 marks each, and that is basically the passage that we have today. Have a look at it. Have a look at it for a couple of minutes, and then we can start discussing this particular passage. Right. So एक बार देख लेना. I think 8-9 हो गया है. So we will start discussing this at 8:11, right? So that is when we'll start discussing this. So you have 1.5, 2 minutes to look at it. So एक बार देख लेना, and then we can start with the discussion. Meanwhile, if anybody has solved this passage and wants to just contribute the answers, you may do so, and we can maybe have a look at it a bit later. All right. So let's have a look at the passage now. We'll just go through it once. I think all of you have had enough time to look at it. Yeah. So we will look at the passage. And some of you who want more time before you actually look at the answers and the way in which we solve this, you can take some time. You can read the passage on your own, pause the video, and I think you should be fine. Okay. So let's get going with the solving. Oh, Arkutipto, that's great. You got one incorrect today. I think it's a very good performance, to be very honest. And Victor, it's okay. Not a problem. We haven't really started much, so you haven't missed anything. All right, so let's get going with the passage. Let's read the passage. Now, there are a couple of ways that you can react to, right, in this particular context. तो एक तो चीज ये है that I'm sure that you will be able to read the entire passage like I normally do. I'll read the entire thing, try to make sense of everything, have a mental picture ready, then look at the questions, and I will not really come back to the passage again, mostly, unless I have to verify some fact, or I'm not really trusting my memory or my judgment. It does not really make a lot of sense. It is hopping around a lot of topics. ऐसा कुछ अगर है ना, then only then will I be coming back to the passage. Otherwise, I will not come back to the passage. I'll just rely on my memory and I will mark the answers. So that is generally what I do. And in terms of another way of solving RC passages, एक try करके देख लेते हैं. I'll just show you one thing that I wanted to show you since a long time, but today I think is the day when we do this. तो एक अलग strategy होता है यहाँ पे, and that strategy basically requires you to read the first and the last lines of each paragraph. So let's say you are not very good at reading things. जो बहुत लोगों के comments भी आए हैं on a lot of our videos that you are not very good at reading things. You can't retain things. You tend to read and then you forget all of a sudden, and then you have to reread for the passage to make sense to you. And ये चलते रहता है, right? So that is something that you need to avoid. तो उसके लिए हम क्या करेंगे? We will read the first line and the last line of each paragraph, and we will see what is it that we can think about. Then we will look at the questions. Then we will come and read the passage. ठीक है, तो एक try कर लेते हैं in this particular passage. The end of the age of the internal combustion engine is in sight. So internal combustion engine का एंड इज इन साइट. ओके, सो सॉरी. So internal combustion engine का end होने वाला है. Now let's not read about anything else. I can see vehicles and because we saw Musk and everything, it's fine. But internal combustion engine का end आ गया है. Now we will look at the last line of this paragraph. This remarkable figure for a machine with a fairly short range and very limited number of specialized charging stations. तो यहाँ पे चार्जिंग स्टेशन आ गया. एक कोई तो रिमार्केबल फिगर है, कुछ तो हो रहा है यहाँ पे, विच इज आउट, मतलब समथिंग दैट यू कांट इवन थिंक अबाउट. फॉर अ मशीन विद अ फेयरली शॉर्ट रेंज, मतलब कुछ लिमिटेशंस हैं. So in spite of this machine having some limitations, there is still a lot of demand apparently. And charging station भी बहुत कम है, तो भी मतलब इसमें demand है. That is one thing. Second paragraph, some of it reflects the remarkable abilities of Elon Musk, the company's founder. As a salesman, engineer, and a man able to get the most out of his factory workers and the governments he deals with, Mr. Musk is selling a dream that the world wants to believe. This is more or less one line that we are looking at, right? So this is essentially talking about the abilities of Musk and the belief that people have in Musk's abilities and the kind of network that he has, the kind of work he gets done from his factory workers and so on. तो ये मस्क के बारे में. नेक्स्ट पैराग्राफ, दिस लास्ट मे बी द मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंट फैक्टर इन द स्टोरी. मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंट फैक्टर क्या था? मस्क का कनेक्शन बहुत है, पीपल वांट टू बिलीव इन दिस स्टोरी. दैट वाज द मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंट फैक्टर. ठीक है, अब इसको फॉरगेट अबाउट दिस पैराग्राफ नाउ. Now read the next bit. Cars that were as silent as bicycles would still be as dangerous as they are now to anyone they hit without audible warning. So today's cars at least give an audible warning because of their internal combustion engine का working and because of the fuel that they use, जो भी है मतलब whatever the workings of that particular engine. But electric cars is what we are assuming we are talking about. वहाँ पे audible warning भी नहीं होता, so they are as silent as bicycles, and because of that there might be some accidents. That's it. The dream goes further than that. Now I don't know what the dream is. It goes further than that. Doesn't matter. Last में क्या हो गया? We will all have to take the electrically powered bicycles. Now, without reading the entire passage, think about what is it that you can think, what you can assume is this passage all about. एक step पीछे लेके सोचना. If you were the author of this passage and you were given only these sentences, how would you write this entire story? तो पहले हम बोल रहे हैं कि internal combustion engine is almost dead. That is one thing. Then we are saying that in spite of the electric cars having limitations, they are still in demand. Third thing, that is because of two reasons. One, Musk have बहुत अच्छे political connections and this guy can get work done from his factory workers and so on. But people want to believe in this. That's why it's very important. ये सबसे important factor है. Then कुछ तो दिया है पता नहीं, but end of the paragraph क्या बोला गया है? That cars are also electric cars will also be hazardous in a way that they can also create accidents or they can also lead to accidents because there is no audible warning as such. तो कुछ तो कहीं पे तो चेंज हो रहा है. वी आर सेइंग दैट इलेक्ट्रिक कार्स आर इन वोग, और यहाँ पे ये कंप्लीट करने के लिए क्या लगेगा? विल टॉक अबाउट द प्रोस एंड कॉन्स ऑफ इलेक्ट्रिक कार्स, एंड लास्ट में हम ये बोल रहे हैं कि भाई ये इलेक्ट्रिक कार जो है ना वो भी उतना ही डेंजरस हो सकता है एज अ नॉर्मल पेट्रोल ड्रिवन कार इज. देन द ड्रीम गोज फर्दर देन दैट, मतलब वो एक्सीडेंट्स और प्रोस एंड कॉन्स की बात नहीं कर रही. वी आर थिंकिंग ऑफ एन इवन बिगर थिंग. और लास्ट में क्या बोला है? वी विल ऑल हैव टू टेक इलेक्ट्रिकली पावर्ड बाइसिकल्स. तो ये ड्रीम बहुत बड़ा है, but this dream will not lead to everyone going for an electric car or something. At the end of the day, we will all have to take electrically powered bicycles. तो यहाँ पे कुछ तो transition हो रहा है in this particular paragraph, wherein one thing leads to another, and we are simply saying that okay, we will have to take bicycles at the end of the day, right? So that is basically the flow of the passage. Now let's look at the question first, and then we will look at what exactly to see in that particular passage. Now, which of the following statements best reflects the author's argument? अब इसके लिए मेरे को पूरा passage पढ़ना पड़ेगा, right? Because author's argument is a central idea of the passage that flows through all the 5-6 paragraphs that we just saw, right? तो उसके अंदर क्या argument किया गया? One thing we know for sure that we are talking about electric vehicles. We are talking about their pros, their cons. People want to believe in that dream. That's why they are in vogue, and आगे जाके शायद उनका और proliferation होगा. But at the end, this guy says that, but we will have to take cycles at the end, right? Second question एक बार देख लेते हैं. We'll go to the important part and then see. Points out to all of the following about electric cars except, तो यहाँ पे मुझे electric cars के पास जाना पड़ेगा, and then we will be able to look at electric cars वाला part, right? तो यहाँ पे we are talking about that part जहाँ पे you will have a lot of pros and cons that have been given to you in terms of the electric cars, and we know where that is more or less, right? तो यहाँ पे एक वाला part है, most important factor है, and यहाँ पे we are saying that there are some pros that are there, but the problem is that they can also hit people without any audible warning. ये यहाँ पे दिया हुआ है. So we have to look at somewhere here. That is basically the point of the story, right? Look, let's look at the third question as well. Try to figure out कि कहाँ पे अपने को ध्यान देना है. थर्ड क्वेश्चन, अकॉर्डिंग टू द ऑथर द मेन रीजन फॉर टेस्लास रिमार्केबल सेल्स, बोला था हम लोगों ने। रिमार्केबल सेल्स के बारे में क्या था, दो चीजें बोली गई थी। वन वाज Elon Musk can get work done from his factory workers. One has a lot of government contacts, same thing, and people want to believe in that particular. ठीक है, people want to believe in that particular dream that something like this is achievable, right? So we'll again look at it once we look at the paragraph, and again that is there in the paragraph. हमको पता है कि first slide पे ही था ये चीज. The author comes to the conclusion. सबसे last वाला part, we have to look at the entire passage to see what leads to what conclusion, or what is the conclusion that this entire passage leads to. In paragraphs 5 and 6, the author provides the example of Uber to argue that. तो Uber के बारे में कुछ था which we didn't see. Uber करके लिखा था, that much we saw, but we didn't read what Uber was about. So we'll have to pay attention to the paragraphs 5 and 6 जहाँ पे Uber के बारे में बताया गया है. Paragraph 6 again we have to pay very close attention to it. The author mentions electrically powered bicycles. सबसे last statement था, electrically powered bicycles लेके ही जाना पड़ेगा, right? So those are the questions that we have. Now let's see what to do. Which are the following statements? Author's argument मेरे को देखना है. We have to read the entire passage. Conclusion निकालना है. Paragraph 5, 6 are critical. Elon Musk is critical. So that is what we are, and Uber is critical, right? So there are these 3, 4, 5 things that we have to be very careful about when we are reading the passage. बाकी जो ज्ञान है, कितना सेल हुआ है, क्या हुआ है, वो सब कुछ जरूरत नहीं है, right? We are only as in only these things are relevant to us to be able to solve this puzzle. तो देख लेते हैं. The end of the internal combustion engine is in sight. Yes, there are small signs everywhere. तो कैसे का end हो रहा है वो बता रहे हैं. The shift to hybrid vehicles hybrid vehicles is already underway among manufacturers. Volvo has announced that it will make no purely petrol engine cars after 2019. Tesla has just started selling its first electric car aimed squarely at the middle classes. ये सारे examples हैं. We don't really need to look at this. The Tesla 3 sells for $35,000 in the US, and 4 lakh people, 400,000 people have put down a small refundable deposit towards one. तो हम क्या बोल रहे हैं यहाँ पे, जो पेट्रोल इंजन कार्स थे, पेट्रोल कार्स ये नीचे जा रहे हैं, एंड एट द हाइब्रिड व्हीकल्स वाला पार्ट हैज स्टार्टेड, एंड इलेक्ट्रिक vehicles slash Tesla are both going up. ये हम बोल रहे हैं, ठीक है. Several thousand have already taken the delivery, and the company hopes to sell 500,000 more next year. This is a remarkable figure for a machine. तो ये मशीन अभी भी मतलब रेंज कम है, इलेक्ट्रिक चार्जिंग स्टेशंस कम है, बट इन स्पाइट ऑफ दैट पीपल आर शिफ्टिंग फ्रॉम पेट्रोल ड्रिवन कार्स टू इलेक्ट्रिक कार्स स्लैश हाइब्रिड कार्स. ये हो रहा है. Some of it reflects the remarkable abilities of Elon Musk, the company's founder, as a salesman. So salesman, he is very good at sales. Engineer, good engineering capabilities, and factory worker से अच्छा काम निकलवा लिया, very good. Government से अच्छा काम निकलवा लिया, very good. So all these are good attributes. Mr. Musk is selling a dream that the world wants to believe in. World wants to believe in. ठीक है, मतलब अभी तक हुआ नहीं है, but we desperately want it to succeed, right? It's like saying something, जो भी है मतलब, of a future जहाँ पे you will have roads in air, let's say for example. ठीक है ना, everybody would want to believe in that thing. अरे मतलब अगर roads जमीन पे नहीं होके अगर ऊपर air taxis वगैरह start हो जाएंगे तो we'll be very happy, that kind of a thing, right? So everybody wants to believe in it, but it may or may not come true. So it's a dream at the end of the day. This last may be the most important factor. क्या factor है? People are believing, people want it, genuinely they want it कि ये succeed होना चाहिए. The private car is a device of immense practical help. So private car की बात की, ठीक है. Now we are looking at private cars slash hybrid cars slash electric cars slash petrol driven cars. All these cars are private cars. Now private cars के अंदर private car का क्या point है? That is basically the logic or the reason behind having this paragraph. Is a device of immense practical help and economic significance. तो practical help भी होता है, economically भी it makes a lot of sense for you, but at the same time a theater of myths of unattainable self-fulfillment. अब again this is a theater of myths. These are very not something that you use normally ना. तो theater of myths करके बोला गया, मतलब बहुत सारे myth है इसके around, जो जिसकी वजह से they are still there but they might not be true. Reasons behind having a private car might not be rational. That is what is being said here. The one thing you will never see in a car advertisement is traffic. तो कोई car advertisement में traffic नहीं आता, even though that is the element in which drivers spend their lives, right? So car advertisement always show an empty racetrack or an empty road and the car just whirs past it. But actual reality में तो मतलब you have to drive it in traffic, right? Every single driver in a traffic jam is trying to escape from it, yet it is the inevitable consequence of mass car ownership. So this is something that we call a paradox. ठीक है। पैराडॉक्स का मतलब क्या हो गया? एवरी ड्राइवर वांट्स द ट्रैफिक टू रिड्यूस, बट बिकॉज everyone wants to drive a car as well, the traffic will increase, right? So you want something, but you are acting in a way that is counter intuitive. It's not something that is rational. ये हो रहा है, ठीक है? The sleek and swift electric car is at one level merely the most contemporary fantasy of autonomy and power. तो sleek and swift electric car तो है, and it is a fantasy of autonomy and power, right? So autonomy and power मतलब क्या? मैं अपनी गाड़ी चला रहा हूँ. I am driving my own vehicle, private car, right? That is what is the significance. But it might also disrupt our exterior landscapes nearly as much as the fossil fuel engine car did in the last century. तो यहाँ पे बोल रहे हैं कि ऑटोनॉमी मिलेगा, पावर मिलेगा, इलेक्ट्रिक कार है तो फॉसिल फ्यूल कम होगा, इज व्हाट वी आर ट्राइंग टू अज्यूम. इट विल ऑल्सो डिसरप्ट और एक्सटीरियर लैंडस्केप्स नियरली एज मच एज. सो एक्सटीरियर लैंडस्केप्स को उतना ही हानि फैलाएगा ये, राइट? जितना फॉसिल फ्यूएल्ड इंजन कार यूज्ड टू डू, राइट? सो व्हाटएवर यूज्ड टू बी द इल इफेक्ट्स ऑफ फॉसिल फ्यूएल्ड इंजन कार्स, सेम विल बी दी, और समथिंग सिमिलर विल हैपन इन केस ऑफ इलेक्ट्रिक कार्स एज वेल. कैसे? इलेक्ट्रिकल कार्स वुड ऑफ कोर्स पोल्यूट फार लेस देन फॉसिल फ्यूल्स, सो पोल्यूशन विल गो डाउन. Pollution will go down, but instead of oil reserves, the rarest materials for batteries would make undeserving despots and their dynasties fantastically rich. So again, ये वाला part आ गया. Rarest material for battery. So let's say, for example, to drive that car, you require a battery which is made of a material that is extremely rare in nature. तो मैंने पेड़ काटना तो बंद कर दिए फॉसिल फ्यूल्स के लिए. आई डिड नॉट रियली एक्सकेवेट थिंग्स एंड गेट पेट्रोल एंड नेचुरल गैस फ्रॉम द रिजर्व्स दैट एग्जिस्ट इन द अर्थ सर्विस. वो सब तो मैंने बंद कर दिया. बर्निंग इट इज नॉट रियली कॉजिंग मी पोल्यूशन, बट व्हाट इज द प्रॉब्लम? आई एम स्टिल डिपेंडेंट ऑन गेटिंग रेयरेस्ट मटेरियल्स फॉर बैटरीज ना. तो मुझे माइनिंग करना पड़ेगा, लेट्स से ट्रांसपोर्ट करना पड़ेगा वो मटेरियल, तो वो सब चीजें तो करनी पड़ेंगी ही. So all those things are still going to affect the environment in some other way. It will not really pollution, but it can be because of the rarest materials. ठीक है. So rarest materials की वजह से again the depletion will go up. वो बोला गया है. Petrol stations would disappear, which is fine. But then undeserving despots बोला गया है. Some people who have a hold on mining these materials will become rich, right? And they might have monopolies, and that might lead to a global economic जो भी imbalance वो सब हो सकता है, right? And the dynasty is fantastically rich. मतलब वो लोग अपने लोगों को rich बना देंगे, simple. Petrol stations would disappear. Yes, the air in cities would once more be breathable and their streets as quiet as those of Venice. This isn't an unmixed good. Isn't an unmixed good. ठीक है, वो एकदम प्योर गुड नहीं है. अनमिक्स्ड मतलब प्योर. सो वेन एवर यू गेट दिस काइंड ऑफ अ थिंग ना, इजंट एन अनमिक्स्ड गुड, तो इसको यू कैन रिमूव दिस थिंग. तो अनमिक्स्ड के जगह पे ना इसको प्योर करो. मिक्सचर जिसमें नहीं हो प्योर हो गया ना. इजंट अ प्योर गुड मतलब कुछ तो इविल है उसके अंदर. क्या इविल है? दैट्स द लाइन दैट वी हैड रेड. Although we are saying that okay, autonomy मिलेगा, power मिलेगा, fossil fuels will get depleted at a lesser pace, but in spite of that, there are some negatives as well. There might be some mining that is required, some environmental damage that might happen because of these rare materials that we need for batteries. We will unintentionally create undeserving despots who will control the wealth, and उनके dynasties rich बन जाएंगे. So that is what we are giving them. Air might be breathable, everything might be fine, but people might also suffer from accidents because of the lack of any audible warning. तो ये पूरा स्टोरी है यहाँ पे. द ड्रीम गोज फर्दर देन दैट. तो यहाँ पे सिर्फ हम लोग फॉसिल फ्यूल्स वगैरह की बात नहीं कर रहे हैं, ड्रीम उसके भी आगे जाता है. The electric cars of the future will be so thoroughly equipped with sensors and reaction mechanisms that they will never hit anyone. राइट? तो यहाँ पे ड्रीम जो है ना वो और आगे चला जाता है. वी आर नॉट जस्ट टॉकिंग अबाउट पीपल गेटिंग हिट. अगर वही प्रॉब्लम है, द इलेक्ट्रिक कार्स ऑफ द फ्यूचर विल डेफिनेटली बी एबल टू अवॉइड हिटिंग पीपल. वो हो सकता है. जस्ट एज ब्रेक्स डोंट लेट यू स्किड टुडे, द स्टीयरिंग व्हील ऑफ टुमारो विल स्वर्व यू अवे फ्रॉम डेंजर बिफोर यू हैव एवर नोटिस्ड इट. सो अगेन वहां पे टेक्नोलॉजिकल इंप्रूवमेंट्स हो सकते हैं. टेक्नोलॉजिकल, ठीक है. देयर विल बी टेक्नोलॉजिकल इंप्रूवमेंट्स टू काउंटर एक्सीडेंट्स. ठीक है, ये हो सकता है. दिस इज वेयर द फैंटेसी ऑफ ऑटोनॉमी कम्स फुल सर्कल. अब यहाँ पे ऑटोनॉमी, हम लोग दो चीजों की बात की थी, पावर एंड ऑटोनॉमी की बात की थी. सो ओनिंग अ कार गिव्स अस दैट ऑटोनॉमी कि वी आर सेल्फ रिलायंट, वी आर इंडिपेंडेंट, वी आर इन कंट्रोल. दैट इज ऑटोनॉमी. ठीक है. तो ऑटोनॉमी कम्स फुल सर्कल. द लॉजिकल आउटकम ऑफ कार्स विच नीड नो ड्राइवर इज दैट दे विल बिकम कार्स विच नीड नो ओनर ईदर. राइट। सो अगर कार के अंदर ड्राइवर ही नहीं चाहिए, ड्राइवरलेस कार्स अगर जा रहे हैं, देन ओनर की भी जरूरत नहीं है। द कार्स कैन फंक्शन ऑन देयर ओन। व्हाई डू आई नीड टू ओन अ कार इफ देयर इज ऑलरेडी अ ड्राइवरलेस कार एंड दैट अवॉइड्स ऑल माय एक्सीडेंट्स एंड इज गुड इनफ टू ड्राइव इन ट्रैफिक एंड एवरीथिंग? Instead, they will work as taxis do. Someone that will, but only for the journeys we actually need. Right? So whenever we need it, तो ही हम उसको ऑर्डर करेंगे, कार को बुलाएंगे. Otherwise, we are not really looking at getting or having a car, taking care of it, servicing it. वो सब मेहनत करने की जरूरत नहीं है ना. If driverless cars हैं and they are going to save us from all kinds of accidents and pollution भी कम होगा, everything is fine. I need not even own the car. I'll just go and sit in the car whenever I want. I'll demand a car. I'll go and sit inside the car. That's it. This is the future towards which Uber is working, right? The ultimate development of the private car will be to reinvent public transport. Right? The ultimate development of the private car will be to reinvent public transport. इसका क्या मतलब बन गया? Now we are asking the car to come to our place, pick us up and take us to our location. जैसे हम लोग अभी Uber में करते हैं, something similar to that, right? So that is basically what is going to happen. Uber is also working on the same thing, was working on the same thing in 2018. तो ये 2018 का passage है, right? So that is happening. Now we are saying that private car में क्या होगा? Public transport को reinvent किया जाएगा. So instead of having public transport, which people don't use, right? People don't use buses and trains. Maybe some people don't use buses and trains purely because there is a lot of crowd there. They do not really turn up on time. They wait at a lot of places. उसके लिए you might prefer taking a cab. But यहाँ पे वही चीज होगा. You are taking a private car, but this private car will sort of replace public transport, right? तो ये यहाँ पे बोला गया है, hint किया गया है that this will the private car will sort of revolutionize or reinvent public transport. ठीक है, that is basically the traffic jams will be abolished only when the private car becomes a public utility. Of course, if one person is sitting in one car, वो driverless है कि electric है कि petrol है, से फर्क ही नहीं पड़ता. Only if 3-4 people are sitting in a car and it is being driven, it makes sense. Or if it is a larger car and it can carry maybe 10-15 people from one place to the other, then it makes a lot of sense क्योंकि तभी मेरा traffic कम होगा ना. That was basically the issue earlier. Traffic jams will be abolished only when the private car becomes a public utility. What then will happen to our fantasies of independence? तो फिर से प्रॉब्लम हो गया. Now because again we are traveling with others, we are losing autonomy, we are losing control कि मुझे यहाँ से ही जाना है, I want to stop here first, wait for 10 minutes then go. All those things are getting affected because of this giving up of autonomy and getting converting this private car into public transport. We will all have to take electrically powered bicycles. So then if we need to have private transport, we need not own a car because जहाँ पे भी car का journey है, we can manage it. Wherever we need larger public transport, we can still manage it. But if I want to travel independently, if I want to have autonomy, control over where I'm traveling, I will use electrically powered bicycles. That's it. ठीक है? तो ये पूरा passage अपना बन गया. Now we look at the questions. Which of the following statements best reflects the author's argument? So we paid attention to some things. I hope all of you were sensing that there were some points जहाँ पे हम लोगों ने ज़्यादा ध्यान दिया था. So that is basically the idea of looking at the questions first and then looking at the passage entirely, and that will generally help you solve these questions properly. ठीक है? Which of the following statements best reflects the author's argument? तो author का argument क्या है? Author का पूरा argument क्या था? One was author spoke about electric cars replacing normal cars, the benefits of electric cars that were there. The most important benefit, according to the author, is not that it saves fuel because there is a counter to it, not because it does not cause accidents because there is a counter to it. ये सारी चीजें हैं. The thing that appeared at the in the middle of the passage and towards the end of the passage was power and autonomy. Even last में जब author end करता है ना, autonomy, yeah. Even last में when the author ends the passage, the author tells you that the private car will have to become public for all the benefits to be manifested. And अगर वो होगा तो you will lose autonomy. So we are talking about power and autonomy that comes with riding or driving a private car. ठीक है? So hybrid and electric vehicles signal the end of the age of the internal combustion engines. While this is true, right, it is not the author's argument, main argument नहीं है. That is the first line of the passage. अब अगर first line of the passage में हमको सब समझ में आ गया author का argument, what is the point of reading 6 paragraphs? So always think about things that are present throughout the passage. Always look for things that are omnipresent. ठीक है, हर जगह पे अगर वो होंगे ना तो ही मतलब इट विल मेक सेंस, अदरवाइज दे डोंट रियली मेक अ लॉट ऑफ सेंस। तो यहाँ पे व्हाइल दिस इज ट्रू, इट इज पार्शियल एंड एक्सट्रीमली पार्शियल। ऐसा भी नहीं है कि दो तीन जगह पे है, एक ही जगह पे दिया हुआ है, just the first line. So this is a question mark for me. It's not exactly my answer. It is true, but not my best answer. Elon Musk is a remarkably gifted salesman. Again, partially true. It's there. But again, मेरे को बोलना था कि Elon Musk is a remarkably gifted salesman. So why would the author spend 90% of the passage not talking about Elon Musk at all? Elon Musk is a remarkably gifted salesman is present only in one line, and there is only one paragraph of 2-3 lines that is dedicated to Elon Musk ka prowess. Otherwise, the passage does not talk about this. So this is again extremely partial, not the central idea of the passage at all. कार की बात ही नहीं कर रहे हैं यहाँ पे. We are talking about private cars. We are talking about electric cars. We are talking about power, autonomy. ये सब बात कर रहे हैं. Elon Musk और salesman, not even cars. Elon Musk is a remarkably gifted salesman. No. The private car represents an unattainable myth of independence. Beautifully done. Private car. ठीक है, तो बताया गया प्राइवेट कार अपना खुद का कार अगर होगा तो वी विल फील दैट वी आर इन कंट्रोल, वी हैव ऑटोनॉमी, वी हैव पावर, बट इट इज एन अनअटेनेबल मिथ, right? It is an unattainable myth. मतलब वो हो ही नहीं सकता, because the more private cars are there, the more you will suffer, the more you will have to look at making them converting them into public transport to make your life easier, and फिर वो तुम्हारा independence होगा ही नहीं वहां पे, right? So this is a much better option than this one. So A को हम लोग निकाल सकते हैं. A versus C के अंदर C is definitely the one that covers the central idea of the passage. Last, the future Uber car will be environmentally friendlier than even the Tesla. No, we just know that Uber is working towards it. दिस इज द फ्यूचर टुवर्ड्स विच उबर इज वर्किंग. अब वो पक्का होगा नहीं होगा, टेस्ला से बेटर होगा, वी डोंट, राइट? सो डी इज डेफिनेटली नॉट समथिंग दैट हैज बीन मेंशन्ड इन द पैसेज. अगेन, उबर कार उठाया हुआ है, टेस्ला उठाया हुआ है, एनवायरमेंटली फ्रेंडलियर उठाया हुआ है. दिस इज प्योरली फॉर पीपल हु नॉट रेड द पैसेज एट ऑल. दे जस्ट नो दैट अच्छा देयर इज समवेयर मेंशन्ड दैट उबर है, समवेयर टेस्ला हैज बीन मेंशन्ड, समवेयर एनवायरमेंटल फ्रेंडलीनेस हैज बीन मेंशन्ड, तो ये मेरा हो सकता है. Right? So D is absolutely rubbish. B is absolutely rubbish. A and C के अंदर C is definitely the more global option. That's why the correct answer here is option C. ठीक है? I hope this is clear. Okay, Arkodip, so just let me check once. Undermine वाला question I think will come a bit later. तो देख लेते हैं उसको. Right? Second question, the author points out all of the following about electric cars except their reliance on rare materials for batteries will support despotic rule. Perfect. Rare materials करेंगे, we undeserving despots will happen, dynasties will get a lot of money. ये बोला गया undeserving despots and the dynasties fantastically rich बनेंगे because rarest of minerals are required for batteries. So that is definitely a problem, right? About electric cars, ये तो पक्का बताया गया है. This is true according to the passage. It will create despots, it will create or support despotic rule. Despot क्या होता है ये बताने की जरूरत नहीं है. बाय द वे यू कैन फॉरगेट अबाउट व्हाट दिस वर्ड मींस, यू कैन जस्ट से कि हाँ मतलब समथिंग लाइक दिस इज देयर. बहुत कंफ्यूजन हो रहा है, क्वेश्चन मार्क मार देना, लुक एट द अदर ऑप्शंस एंड यू शुड बी फाइन. दे विल रिड्यूस एयर एंड नॉइज पोल्यूशन. नाउ एयर एंड नॉइज पोल्यूशन भी कम करेंगे करके बोला हुआ है, राइट? सो इन टर्म्स ऑफ द पोल्यूशन वाला पार्ट, ऑफ कोर्स विल पोल्यूट फार लेस देन फॉसिल फ्यूल ड्रिवन वंस, ये बोला गया है. एंड ऑल्सो ऑडिबल वार्निंग नहीं है, साइलेंट एज बाइसिकल्स दिया हुआ है, ब्रीथेबल एंड द स्ट्रीट्स एज क्वाइट एज दोस ऑफ वेनिस. वी आर टॉकिंग एक्सप्लिसिटली अबाउट एयर पोल्यूशन एंड नॉइज पोल्यूशन. तो दिस इज ऑल्सो ट्रू. सो द ऑथर पॉइंट्स दिस आउट फॉर श्योर. दे विल नॉट डिक्रीज द नंबर ऑफ ट्रैफिक जैम्स, ये भी बताया गया है. दे विल नॉट डिक्रीज द नंबर ऑफ ट्रैफिक जैम्स. व्हाई? बिकॉज यहाँ पे अगर देखेंगे, वेयर डिड इट गो, या सो all right. Yeah. Inevitable. The sleek and swift electric car is at one level merely the most contemporary fantasy of autonomy and power. Exterior landscapes nearly as much as ये pollute करेंगे, rarest materials, petrol stations would disappear and ये सब चीजें होंगी. ये यहाँ पे दिया हुआ है, right? But यहाँ पे again the same thing will happen. We are not really saying that उससे traffic jam ये होगा. Traffic jams will be abolished only when the private car becomes a public utility. Otherwise, they will not decrease the number of traffic jams, right? तो यहाँ पे this is also true in a way. Author बोल रहा है कि electric cars will not decrease the number of traffic jams. So that has not been mentioned as an explicit benefit of electric cars. They will ultimately undermine rather than further driver autonomy. They will ultimately undermine rather than further driver autonomy. Now you have to think about this. क्वेश्चन क्या है? द ऑथर पॉइंट्स आउट ऑल द फॉलोइंग अबाउट इलेक्ट्रिक कार्स, right? Electric cars will not decrease traffic jams. Electric cars will reduce air and noise pollution. Electric cars rely on rare materials. Will electric cars ultimately undermine rather than further driver autonomy, or private cars? Right? So that's why this was a difficult question, because we are talking about private cars here. We are not talking about electric cars. Private cars भी undermine कर रहे हैं driver autonomy को. Right? Electric cars will also undermine driver autonomy. Everything will further driver will undermine driver autonomy. बट प्राइवेट कार्स इज द कीवर्ड. इलेक्ट्रिक कार्स की वजह से ड्राइवर ऑटोनॉमी नीचे नहीं जाएगा. इलेक्ट्रिक कार्स की वजह से ड्राइवर ऑटोनॉमी विल रिमेन वेयर इट इज. इट विल नॉट अल्टीमेटली अंडरमाइन. इट इज ऑलरेडी अंडरमाइंड इन अ वे, राइट? सो प्राइवेट कार्स की वजह से अंडरमाइन, अल्टीमेटली अंडरमाइन हुआ है. सो प्राइवेट कार्स विल अल्टीमेटली अंडरमाइन रादर देन फर्दर ड्राइवर ऑटोनॉमी. That is basically the thing, because they will have to be converted into public transport, right? So that's why D is the one that is misplaced in a way. ठीक है? I hope you know what is misplaced, right? We are not talking about electric cars, we are talking about private cars. It's a very subtle question. Honestly, when I saw it for the first time, even I got confused. The other three options were so obvious that D seemed to be the one that was slightly abstract. Because ये सारे factual है ना, ये तो 100% बताया गया है, ये 100% बताया गया है, वैसे का वैसा बताया गया है पैसेज के अंदर, right? So that was basically the problem. So then I am torn between C and D. They will not decrease the number of traffic jams. ये कहीं पे मतलब बोला तो है कि इलेक्ट्रिक कार्स की वजह से ट्रैफिक जाम्स कम नहीं होंगे करके, राइट? बट लास्ट वाला इज hinted towards private cars. That is the important. Next question देख लेते हैं. According to the author, the main reason for Tesla's remarkable sales is that, again we saw, people want to believe in that product, right? People want driverless cars. People yearn for power and autonomy, and they believe that यहाँ से ये मिल जाएगा, कैसे कुछ सोच रहे हैं. In the long run, the Tesla is more cost effective than fossil fuel cars. ये कहीं पे नहीं बताया गया है, right? Nowhere has it been mentioned that Tesla is more cost effective than fossil fuel driven cars. तो ये तो नहीं बोल सकता मैं. US government has announced a tax subsidy for Tesla buyers. That is not the main reason, right? US government has announced a tax subsidy for Tesla buyers because they might be popular or something. ठीक है, because they believe कि environment में कम harm होगा करके. But what is the reason behind the sales? तो यहाँ पे दिया हुआ है. Remarkable. Okay, let's see. Volvo has announced no purely petrol. Tesla has started selling its first electric car. Tesla 3 sells for 35,000, 4 lakh people, small refundable deposit, several thousand taken delivery. ये सब चीजें यहाँ पे दी गई हैं, right? But यहाँ पे कहीं भी बोला नहीं है ना कि गवर्नमेंट सब्सिडी दे देगा, right? So again, that is something that has not been explicitly mentioned. So this is how. The company is rapidly upscaling the number of specialized charging stations for customer convenience. Not mentioned in the passage at all. It has been mentioned as a challenge that charging stations are few. ये बोला है. But ऐसा नहीं बोला है कि the company is upscaling the charging stations and उसके बाद तो मतलब because of that the sales have increased. No. The sales have increased because people want something, right? What do people want? People believe in the autonomy represented by private cars. People want private cars. People want private cars. उसके साथ में environmentally it is going to benefit us, and it is basically the new thing that manufacturers are also moving away from. So people want private cars. People want private cars because they want autonomy, and that's why people will buy cars. And because car का industry पूरा का पूरा electric vehicles के यहाँ पे move कर रहा है, people will want to buy electric cars. That is basically the point. ठीक है? So option D is the correct one, correct answer to this one. Next देख लेते हैं. The author comes to the conclusion. What does the author come to the conclusion? क्या conclusion पे आता है author? Car drivers will no longer own cars but will have to use public transport. Car drivers will no longer own cars but will have to use public transport. ऐसा have to कुछ नहीं बोला गया है, right? You will prefer going for public transport because that will reduce your stress. और वो सिर्फ car drivers के लिए नहीं है, it is for everyone, right? Even now आज भी अगर arguments देखेंगे, everyone should use public transport technically if you want to reduce pollution, if you want to reduce traffic, right? तो per capita अगर मेरा public transport पूरा का पूरा take over कर लेता है, it is much better for me because it will lead to fewer traffic jams and so on. But my autonomy goes for a toss. A lot of people own a car because they want to have that freedom. We can go wherever, whenever, जैसे भी जब भी मेरे को जाना है, right? So that is basically the point. So car drivers will no longer own cars, but will have to use public transport. We can't say is the conclusion of the passage, right? Cars will be controlled by technology that is more efficient than car drivers. Again, that is not the conclusions. It is one of the things that will work in favor of driverless cars. ये बोल रहे हैं, right? तो यहाँ पे cars will be controlled by technology, not the central idea. कंक्लूजन वो होता है ना जो पूरे पैसेज पढ़ने के बाद मेरे को आए. कंक्लूजन शुड नॉट बी 4 लाइन पढ़ा इनको कंक्लूजन आ गया. लाइक इट शुड नॉट बी द केस, राइट? सो नॉट द मेन कंक्लूजन. ठीक है. So A and B I don't think are good options. Car drivers dream of autonomy, but the future may be public transport. That is again something that has been mentioned. Car drivers dream of autonomy. Everybody dreams of having some autonomy when it comes to driving, but the future may be public transport. Makes sense. लास्ट वाला देख लेते हैं. इलेक्ट्रिकली पावर बाइसिकल्स आर दी ओनली वे टू अचीव ऑटोनॉमी इन ट्रांसपोर्टेशन. ओनली वे नहीं बोला गया है. इट एंड्स ऑन अ रादर आयरॉनिकल और फनी स्लैश सार्कास्टिक नोट कि ये होगा. दिस इज जस्ट द लास्ट सेंटेंस. पूरे पैसेज कंक्लूजन ये नहीं है. पैसेज इज अबाउट ऑटोनॉमी, पैसेज इज अबाउट पावर. प्राइवेट कार के बारे में पैसेज है. पैसेज इज नॉट अबाउट फॉसिल फ्यूल को बचाना या पोल्यूशन कम करना. इट्स नॉट अबाउट दैट. द पैसेज इज अबाउट पावर एंड ऑटोनॉमी अबाउट प्राइवेट कार्स. इट्स नॉट अबाउट इलेक्ट्रिक कार्स. ऑल्दो देर इज अ थिंग कि मतलब इलेक्ट्रिक कार्स बहुत बार बताया गया है यहाँ पे, बट इट इज अबाउट ओनरशिप ऑफ कार्स, राइट? सो ऑप्शन सी इज द बेस्ट वन. ऑप्शन डी विल नॉट बी योर आंसर ईदर, बिकॉज इट्स जस्ट द लास्ट सेंटेंस एंड इट्स नॉट द ओनली वे टू अचीव ऑटोनॉमी करके नहीं बोला है. If you read it carefully, we'll all have to take to electrically powered bicycles. What will then happen to our fantasies of independence? Right? तो ये बोला गया. You can walk as well. ऐसा कुछ जरूरी नहीं कि इलेक्ट्रिक पावर बाइसिकल ही लेना चाहिए. Right? So it's not exactly a very firm statement at the end. It's a sarcastic thing, more or less. Right? In paragraphs 5 and 6, the author provides the example of Uber to argue that in the future, electric cars will be equipped with mechanisms that prevent collisions. Now, that is not the idea behind talking about Uber, right? Uber के अंदर बोला गया है कि what is Uber basically? Now, Uber in today's day and age, or Uber is a mass product. Uber में you don't own cars. You are basically renting cars, right? So, Uber can move you away from private ownership of cars. तो आगे जाके when we are looking at private cars as such, it makes a lot of sense for these cars to be converted into Uber, the electric vehicles and the ones with a lot of safety measures, so that you will be able to travel matlab from one place to other without creating traffic jams and stuff. Right? So equipped with mechanisms की बात तो Uber के बारे में नहीं कर रहे हैं. In the future, traffic jams will not exist. No, definitely not. In the future, the private car will be transformed into a form of public transport. Yeah, the private car that was the supposed to be the electric car or the one Tesla, let's say for example, वो हमारा private car होने वाला था. But now we are saying that Uber is also working on the same thing. So Uber is working on the same thing because Uber believes that a person should not own a car. One person can rent a car, hire a car, and go from one place to the other. So instead of 5 of you owning a car and 5 cars being on road, one Uber can make these 5 trips. And that's how you basically have less cars, fewer cars on road. Something like that. Right? So this still makes sense. In the future, Uber rides will outstrip Tesla. ये कहीं पे भी नहीं बोला गया, right? So option C is basically the right answer here. Okay. The good thing is the other options are so far off now that C is more or less the most sane option that you have. Otherwise, बाकी तीनों तो मतलब Uber का example because of this तो नहीं दिया. Last one, in paragraph 6, the author mentions electrically powered bicycles to argue that. राइट? तो क्या आर्ग्यूमेंट करते हैं? इलेक्ट्रिकली पावर्ड बाइसिकल्स, बिकॉज ऑटोनॉमी के चक्कर में इसके चक्कर में हम लोगों ने कार्स को, पूरा प्राइवेट कार्स को पब्लिक बना दिया. फाइनली बनाना पड़ेगा, एंड बिकॉज ऑफ दैट वी विल हैव टू यूज बाइसिकल्स. If Elon Musk were a true visionary, he would invest funds in developing electric bicycles. No, that's not what the author is trying to say, right? The author is saying कि जितना हम ऑटोनॉमी की तरफ जा रहे हैं उतना ही हम ऑटोनॉमी से दूर जा रहे हैं. Our fantasies of autonomy might unexpectedly require us to consider electric bicycles. Yes, our fantasies of autonomy might unexpectedly. We are expecting autonomy by driving cars, driverless cars honge, electric cars honge. That's what we are expecting. But that will lead to loss of autonomy, and we'll get autonomy only if we are driving bicycles, riding bicycles. This makes sense. Option C, in terms of environmental friendliness and safety, electric bicycles rather नहीं. He's not saying it for pollution वाला purpose के लिए नहीं बोल रहा हो. Author is saying it to maintain autonomy. मेरे को मेरा private vehicle चाहिए. That's why we want something of our own. Electric buses are the best form of public transport. तो उसका और इसका क्या संबंध? So definitely not. Right. So option B is the one which again is the most sane option, and that will help you answer this particular passage. ठीक है? Next passage देख लेते हैं जल्दी से. Again, I'll give you a couple of minutes to have a look at this, and then we can look at the and then we can look at the answers to this. यहाँ पे 5 questions हैं. So I'll just show you the questions. I'll show you the passage. I'll wait on this for a couple of minutes and we can start at 8:50. So these are the first two paragraphs. These are the second two paragraphs. There is nothing automatically sinister about this trend. Cities such as Dubai, which has pledged to become the happiest city. These are the two paragraphs. Then you have as the science grows more sophisticated, and the last one is happiness becomes a personal project. ये सब दिया हुआ है. ठीक है? And you have the questions from the passage. You can infer that the author would like the economists to. Just give me a second. Yeah, the author would like the economists to. That is the first question that we have. The second question is, according to the author, variable technologies and social media are contributing most to. In the author's opinion, the shift in thinking. That is the third question. The fourth question is, the author's view would be undermined by which of the following research findings. And fifth is, according to the author, Dubai does what? Right? So that is basically the last question of the passage. So एक बार देख लेना, look at it for a couple of minutes, then we will start solving this one. ठीक है? आदित्य, गुड आफ्टरनून तो नहीं बोल सकते, गुड इवनिंग ही हो गया है अभी, राइट? एंड रिगार्डिंग योर क्वेश्चन, आई नीदर सपोर्ट नॉर कंडेम, नथिंग. मतलब you are living in a state, you have to accept the rules of the state, right? So that is something you have to accept whatever is there. There is a history, there is a reason why certain things exist, and जो भी है, you can think from both sides, but there is no good or bad or support or deny or something. ऐसा कुछ नहीं है. It's in the constitution, you have to support the constitution, and yeah, that's basically about it, right? It's not as if I didn't know when I was entering a college or entering a job that certain amount of seats are reserved for someone. ऐसा कुछ भी नहीं था. So I started preparing for CAT with the knowledge that something like this exists. So if I have made peace with the fact, then I should not really think about it anymore because it's not in our control. Okay? Hope that answers or does not answer your question. Yeah. So let's start looking at this one. Let's start looking at this particular passage. It's an interesting passage. This is CAT 2018, I believe. Or acha, this is 18. That was 17, I think. Anyway, economists have spent most of the 20th century ignoring psychology. So again, before we start this one, if you think about it, in the previous passage, what I did was I read the first and the last line of every paragraph. Then I read the questions, and again I read the entire passage. You will see that I took a lot of time to go through that entire passage, right? So it's not my style to read it that way. I would rather read the entire thing in one go properly, then answer the questions. So that is my style. But if it suits your style, you are faster at doing those things, then do it. For sure is what I would suggest. तो वहां पे वो कर लेना if you are very comfortable doing it. I am generally not very comfortable reading only the first line है, जल्दी से पढ़ लिया और फिर क्वेश्चन देख के वापस आ गया. I'm not very comfortable doing that. If I do that, then I'll make a lot of mistakes. So that's why I don't prefer doing it. But if it works for you, it works for you. ठीक है? So we'll do the second passage in the conventional way. Conventional मतलब my way. So let's read the passage first, then we'll answer the question. ठीक है? Okay. Economists have spent most of the 20th century ignoring psychology. राइट. सो इकोनॉमिस्ट्स ने साइकोलॉजी को बिल्कुल इग्नोर कर दिया है 20th सेंचुरी, मतलब 1900s में. दे डिड नॉट थिंक अबाउट साइकोलॉजी एट ऑल, पॉजिटिव और अदरवाइज, पॉजिटिवली और नेगेटिवली जो भी है, दे हैव इग्नोर्ड साइकोलॉजी कंप्लीटली. But there is a great deal of emphasis, but today there is a great deal of emphasis on how happiness can shape. So this is basically the point of the passage. How happiness can shape global economies. ठीक है? Happiness की वजह से global economies कैसे affect होंगे? That is a there is a lot of emphasis, importance given to this. On a smaller scale, successful business practice. This is driven in part by a trend in measuring positive emotions. तो कैसे करेंगे? Why has happiness gotten into economy? Because now there is a trend of measuring positive emotions. So because we are able to measure positive emotions, we can correlate that with global economies ka bit as well. That's what we are trying to say here. Mostly so they can be optimized. So measuring positive emotions and optimizing them so that they lead to better economic results. ऐसा कुछ हो सकता है. Neuroscientists, for example का कोई जरूरत नहीं है. Whenever someone says example and if you have understood everything till that part, you need not read it with a lot of intent. तो जल्दी से पढ़ लेते हैं. Neuroscientists, for example, claim to be able to locate specific emotions such as happiness or disappointment in particular areas of the brain. तो कुछ नहीं समझ में आया, वही है ना मतलब बेसिकली दे आर एबल टू लोकेट कि हैप्पीनेस किधर है, सैडनेस किधर है, जो डिसअपॉइंटमेंट किधर है। वेरिएबल टेक्नोलॉजीज लाइक सच एज स्पायर ऑफर डेटा ड्रिवन एडवाइस ऑन हाउ टू रिड्यूस स्ट्रेस। ठीक है, वेरिएबल टेक्नोलॉजीज, now variable technologies will offer data driven advice on how to reduce stress। तो वही सेम चीज है, measuring positive emotions is one part and reducing stress के लिए कैसे advocate करना है, कैसे advice करना है, that is the other part। both those things are there। so how, where did we go? We went from economy to impact of happiness to measurement of happiness to reducing stress। ठीक है, ये फर्स्ट पैराग्राफ। वी आर नो लॉन्गर जस्ट डीलिंग विद हैप्पीनेस इन अ फिलोसॉफिकल और रोमांटिक सेंस। हैप्पीनेस मतलब आप खुश रहोगे ऐसे नहीं बोल रहे हैं, वी आर डूइंग इट ऑब्जेक्टिवली। इट हैज बिकम समथिंग दैट कैन बी मॉनिटर्ड एंड मेजर्ड। सो मेजर्ड होगा हैप्पीनेस, राइट? सो हैप्पीनेस कैन बी मेजर्ड, दैट इज द पॉइंट, including by our behavior, use of social media and bodily indicators such as pulse rate and facial expressions। So there are a lot of parameters that exist. There are a lot of parameters that exist using which you can measure happiness। there is nothing automatically sinister. Sinister is evil, by the way. In case you have watched those horror movies, you will know that sinister is evil, right? नहीं भी पता तो it's okay, छोड़ दो। But it is disquieting। Disquieting भी नहीं पता, छोड़ दो। That the businesses and experts driving the quantification of happiness। Quantification समझ में आ जाएगा, maths न्यूमेरिकली उसको मेजर कर रहे हैं। Driving the quantification of happiness claim to have our best interests at heart, right? Claim, claim क्या होता है? Claim जनरली मैं जब भी करता हूँ ना claim, so there is some hidden agenda or there is something opposite of it that is going on। So we have to also think about the opposite। If someone claims that something is happening, then usko वो debatable है, that is the point। Happiness claim to have our best interests at heart, right? So everybody is expert, सब लोग claim कर रहे हैं कि they have our best interests at heart, often concealing their own agendas। तो conceal करते हैं their own agendas in the process। ठीक है, तो ये जो है ना ये evil है, ऑटोमेटिकली सिनिस्टर नहीं है, बट यहाँ पे थोड़ा इविलनेस मुझे दिखाई दे रहा है। In the workplace, happy workers are viewed as a win-win। Work becomes more pleasant and employees more productive। So happiness की वजह से workplaces are looking at it positively. But this is now being pursued through the use of performance evaluating wearable technology such as Humanize or Virgin Pulse, both of which monitor physical signs of stress and activity toward the goal of increasing productivity। ठीक है, तो वो क्या करते हैं? मॉनिटर फिजिकल साइंस ऑफ स्ट्रेस, ये मॉनिटर करते हैं जो भी वेरिएबल्स हैं, टेक्नोलॉजी है, एंड एक्टिविटी टुवर्ड्स द गोल ऑफ इंक्रीजिंग प्रोडक्टिविटी। तो इसका क्या मतलब बन गया? ऑल्दो दे से कि भाई हम तो आपके भलाई के लिए सब मॉनिटर कर रहे हैं, वी आर मॉनिटरिंग दिस सो दैट यू डोंट रियली गेट स्ट्रेस्ड आउट, वी आर डूइंग दिस सो दैट यू कैन आइडेंटिफाई दैट यू आर इन सम ट्रबल एंड यू कैन रिएक्ट टू इट। बट ऐसा नहीं है, दे आर डूइंग इट बिकॉज a happy worker will be a more productive worker। that is what has been mentioned here, right? Win-win। happy worker is a win-win situation। क्यों? if you are happy then you will contribute more to the organization and the organization will make a profit। अब वो करने के लिए योर कंपनी विल से कि भाई ये घड़ी पहन के घूमो कल से, एवरी डे वेयर दिस वॉच एंड रोम अराउंड, and whenever this watch shows that you are under stress, you do something about it, you relax or do whatever, but make sure that your stress monitor is always in the positive, you're always happy। ये होना चाहिए क्योंकि उसमें कंपनी का हिडन एजेंडा है, राइट? सो देयर इज अ हिडन एजेंडा ऑफ कंपनीज। ठीक, ये वाला पूरा पैराग्राफ इसके बारे में बात। Cities such as Dubai, now workplace से हम लोग दुबई चले गए सीधा, which has pledged to become the happiest city in the world। So दुबई बोलते हैं भाई हमको तो happiest city in the world बनना है। Dream up even ever more elaborate and intrusive ways of collecting data on well-being, right? मतलब बेसिकली दुबई ने बहुत सारे इलेबोरेट इंट्रूसिव मतलब अंदर घुस के बहुत सारे तरीके ढूंढ के निकाले हैं टू कलेक्ट डेटा, टू द पॉइंट वेयर देयर इज नाउ टॉक ऑफ यूजिंग सीसीटीवी कैमरास टू मॉनिटर फेशियल एक्सप्रेशंस। So Dubai is going एक step further, they will measure your facial expressions as well in public spaces। New ways of detecting emotions are hitting the market all the time। One company beyond verbal aims to calculate moods, so they will calculate moods also now, conveyed in a phone conversation, potentially without the knowledge of at least one of the participants। So it will try to say whether you are in a happy mood or sad mood or disappointed or sarcastic or cruel or whatever, right? तो वो पता करके बताए। And Facebook has demonstrated that it could influence our emotions through tweaking our news feeds, opening the door to ever more targeted manipulation in advertising and influence, right? So advertising influence के अंदर भी इसका issue हो सकता है। सो कैलकुलेट मूड्स करेंगे, दुबई का एक एग्जांपल बताया गया है, फेशियल एक्सप्रेशंस ढूंढेंगे, सम कंपनी विल कैलकुलेट मूड्स बेस्ड ऑन टेक्स्ट कन्वर्सेशन, फोन कन्वर्सेशंस, एंड वी आल्सो हैव एडवर्टाइजिंग एंड इन्फ्लुएंस में फेसबुक का व्हाटएवर वाज। As the science grows more sophisticated and technologies become more intimate with our thoughts and bodies, a clear trend is emerging. Right? एकदम conclusive thing है. Everything is going on. That's why there is a trend emerging. क्या trend है? Where happiness indicators were once used as a basis to reform society. Were once used to do what? Reform society. Challenging the obsession with money that GDP measurement entrenches, challenging the obsession with money that GDP entrenches, they are increasingly used as a basis to transform or discipline individuals. तो पहले क्या होता था, सोसाइटी रिफॉर्म करेंगे, इसके लिए हम लोग हैप्पीनेस करते थे, बिकॉज अ हैप्पी सोसाइटी इज अ अगेन बेटर फंक्शनिंग सोसाइटी, क्राइम रेट कम होगा, आई डोंट नो व्हाट विल हैपन, बट वी विल से दैट रिफॉर्म होगा सोसाइटी, हैप्पीनेस इंडिकेटर्स यूज करेंगे, ठीक है, वो होगा। चैलेंजिंग द ऑब्सेशन विद मनी दैट जीडीपी मेजरमेंट एंट्रेंसेस, तो दो चीजें थी, राइट, यू मस्ट हैव हर्ड द हैप्पीनेस इंडेक्स जो होता है, रैंकिंग्स जो होते हैं। वन, वी आर सेइंग दैट जीडीपी मेजरमेंट करके हम बोलेंगे कि भाई ये कंपनी इतना रिच है, तो द कंपनी विल बी दैट कंटेंट, राइट, बट हैप्पीनेस की वजह से भी कंपनी कंटेंट हो सकता है, भले उसका जीडीपी कम। सो वहां पे हैप्पीनेस इंडिकेटर्स वेर वंस यूज्ड टू रिफॉर्म सोसाइटी, चैलेंजिंग द ऑब्सेशन विद जीडीपी, दे आर इंक्रीजिंगली यूज्ड एज अ बेसिस टू ट्रांसफॉर्म और डिसिप्लिन इंडिविजुअल्स। तो जो हमने कंपनी में देखा, हम मेरे को ऐसा एम्प्लॉय नहीं चाहिए जो हमेशा दुखी रहता है, तो ट्रांसफॉर्म इंडिविजुअल्स। मेरे को ऐसा एम्प्लॉय नहीं चाहिए जो स्ट्रेस में रहता है, विल डिसिप्लिन इंडिविजुअल्स टू बी हैप्पी। Happiness becomes a personal project that each of us must now work on, like going to the gym, right? We have to do it on our own. We have to ensure that we are happy. Since the 1970s, depression has come to be viewed as a cognitive or neurological defect in an individual, defect in the individual. So depression जो है ना, वो individual के अंदर का कोई तो defect है. That is what has been mentioned since 1970s, and never a consequence of circumstances. So never we are talking about circumstances. We are only talking about it being the problem of the individual and not because of the surroundings. All of this simply escalates the sense of responsibility that each of us feels for our own feelings, and with it the sense of failure when things go badly. So we blame ourselves जब भी कुछ गड़बड़ होता है तो, whereas there could be some issue with the circumstances as well which might have led us to being depressed. A society that deliberately removed certain sources of misery such as precarious and exploitative employment, right? So exploitative employment होता था, dangerous employment होता था, वो सबको निकाल दिया है सोसाइटी ने, slavery let's say निकाल दिया है, may well be a happier one, right? A society that deliberately removed ये सब चीजें, whatever is there, उसको निकाल देंगे तो it will be a happier society. But we won't get there by making this single, often fleeting emotion the overarching goal. Single which fleeting emotion we are talking about happiness here. तो अगर मैंने हैप्पीनेस को मेरा अल्टीमेट गोल बना दिया, देन वी आर नेवर गोइंग टू बी एबल टू रीच दैट सोसाइटल लेवल जहां पे वी विल रिमूव ऑल मिसरी फ्रॉम आवर वर्क प्लेसेस, फ्रॉम आवर एनवायरमेंट, एंड विल बिकम हैप्पियर इन जनरल। बट हम लोग सिर्फ एक ही जो जगह पे अगर इमोशन पे फोकस करते रहेंगे, देन इट विल नॉट हैपन, राइट? सो दैट इज बेसिकली द पैसेज। Now, from the passage, we can infer that the author would like the economists to do what? Work closely with neuroscientists to understand human behavior, incorporate psychological findings into their research cautiously, correlate measurements of happiness with economic indicators, या measure the effectiveness of Facebook and social media advertising. One thing तो obviously is out, measure the effectiveness of Facebook and social media advertising तो निकाल दो, क्योंकि वहां पे इकोनॉमिस्ट की बात नहीं कर रहा। Economists will talk about the general well-being of the nation, na, financial well-being. What positive attributes will lead to the company ka, to the country ka GDP growing higher, या company का economy improving. That is the point of it. ठीक है. So author would like the economists to think about, yeah, psychology and न्यूरो साइंटिस्ट के साथ काम करो, ये सब बोला गया। तो न्यूरो साइंटिस्ट क्लेम टू बी एबल टू लोकेट इमोशंस, राइट, एंड साइकोलॉजी को इग्नोर नहीं करना है, साइकोलॉजी को भी पास में लेके साथ में लेके चलना है, सो दैट वी नो दैट वी कैन ऑप्टिमाइज द इकोनॉमी, वी कैन इंप्रूव द इकोनॉमी इफ पीपल आर इन जनरल बीइंग पॉजिटिव, राइट, ये है। सो वर्क क्लोजली विद न्यूरो साइंटिस्ट टू अंडरस्टैंड ह्यूमन बिहेवियर, वो नहीं करना है, दे डोंट वांट टू अंडरस्टैंड ह्यूमन बिहेवियर ना। इकोनॉमिस्ट को ह्यूमन बिहेवियर अंडरस्टैंड करके क्या करना है? Economists to look at the economy of the country, right? So this is the problem. Work closely with neuroscientists, yes, I agree to some extent, but to understand human behavior, no. To study the impact of human behavior and to find some correlation, that is more or less the point, right? Incorporate psychological findings into the research cautiously. This is something that makes sense. इनकॉर्पोरेट साइकोलॉजिकल फाइंडिंग्स करना चाहिए. 20th सेंचुरी में इट डिड नॉट हैपन, बट इट शुड हैपन इज व्हाट द ऑथर इज ट्राइंग टू से. बट कॉशियसली भी करना चाहिए, बिकॉज उसके बाद ऑथर गोज ऑन अ टायरेड एंड सेज दैट भाई ये सब तो बकवास है, हैप्पीनेस वगैरह तो मतलब लोगों ने थोड़ा उसको कमर्शियलाइज टाइप कर दिया है, राइट. सो दैट इज अगेन एन इशू. So that is something that has not been mentioned. So option B जो है ना, incorporate psychological findings into their research cautiously, that seems to be a better option than A. Third, correlate measurements of happiness with economic indicators. Measurements of happiness नहीं बोला है. Author would like economist to. Economist कहाँ पे आते हैं? Economist comes at the right beginning ना. Economists have done this. तो क्या करेंगे? Ignored psychology. क्यों ignore psychology किया है? अभी करना है. But today ट्रांजिशन वर्ड है यहाँ पे. बट टुडे. सो साइकोलॉजी को आज इग्नोर नहीं कर सकते. दैट इज व्हाट हैज बीन मेंशन्ड. ठीक है. सो दैट इज व्हाट वी आर टॉकिंग अबाउट इन टर्म्स ऑफ साइकोलॉजी. एंड दैट्स व्हाई कोरिलेट मेजरमेंट्स ऑफ हैप्पीनेस नहीं आया वहां पे विद इकोनॉमिक इंडिकेटर्स. इनकॉर्पोरेट साइकोलॉजिकल फाइंडिंग्स, दैट इज द कीवर्ड. तो यहाँ पे ऑप्शन बी इज द बेटर ऑप्शन कंपेयर टू ऑप्शन ए. ठीक है. आदित्य, आई होप यू अंडरस्टूड. इट्स अ ट्रिकी क्वेश्चन. आई एम नॉट सेइंग इट्स अ वेरी इजी क्वेश्चन, बट अंडरस्टैंडिंग ह्यूमन बिहेवियर इज नॉट द पॉइंट. The point is to incorporate it into your research cautiously. थोड़ा ध्यान देके ही you can incorporate. But exam time में even I would have got this wrong. Mostly 6 or 7 times out of 10 I would have got it wrong. I have the uh, how would I put it? I have the benefit of having the official key with me, right? That is the point. But otherwise it makes sense. The key is not wrong. But इतना सोचना during the test will be slightly different. नेक्स्ट क्वेश्चन देख लेते हैं. अकॉर्डिंग टू द ऑथर, वेरिएबल टेक्नोलॉजीज एंड सोशल मीडिया आर कंट्रीब्यूटिंग मोस्ट टू डूइंग व्हाट. राइट. वेरिएबल टेक्नोलॉजीज एंड सोशल मीडिया आर कंट्रीब्यूटिंग मोस्ट टू डू व्हाट. सो वेरिएबल टेक्नोलॉजीज क्या बोलते हैं यहाँ पे लास्ट में था ना, करेक्ट. somewhere we had it, right? Variable technology. But this is now pursued through the use of performance evaluating variable technology such as human eyes or virgin pulse, both of which monitor physical signs of stress and activity toward the goal of increasing productivity. तो यहाँ पे वेरिएबल टेक्नोलॉजी बताया गया है एक जगह पे. एंड देयर वाज समवेयर एल्स आल्सो दैट वेरिएबल टेक्नोलॉजी वाज देयर. Yeah, this one. Variable technologies are offer data-driven advice on how to reduce stress. तो यहाँ पे stress कैसे reduce करना है वो बता रहे हैं. And यहाँ पे भी toward the goal of increasing productivity. That is what has been mentioned. तो क्या उसका point है? By to increase productivity. That is the point of making individuals aware of the stress in their lives. हाँ, but end of the day क्या है? It is trying to increase productivity by measuring stress in their lives, right? So जो पहले वाले पैराग्राफ में बताया था वहां पे स्ट्रेस मेजर करते हैं and they tell you how to reduce stress. बाद में बताते हैं कि how to increase productivity by reducing stress. That is basically the point. Depression as a thing of the past. No, that is not the thing. And we're talking about variable technology. Social media देखा नहीं. Social media is also there. Let's see this one. Only this one, right? Yeah. So Facebook has demonstrated that it could influence our emotions through tweaking our news feeds, and that is basically social media. Similarly, if you look at the last part also, this one. Use of social media and bodily indicators as pulse rate and facial expressions. Right? No longer dealing with happiness. It is something that can be monitored, measured. That is the point. और measure क्यों करेंगे? Directly sinister नहीं है, but there is some hidden agenda. What is the hidden agenda? To increase productivity, to discipline people. That is the point, right? So here, if you are looking at it, making individuals aware of the stress in their lives, yes, this is a direct consequence. Depression as a thing of the past, no, that is not leading to depression directly. Disciplining individuals to be happy, yes, it is leading to disciplining. मतलब वो तुम्हारा थोड़ा इनडायरेक्ट ब्रॉडर एस्पेक्ट ये है. हैप्पीनेस एज अ पर्सनल प्रोजेक्ट वो भी यहाँ पे नहीं बताया गया. वेरिएबल टेक्नोलॉजीज इज नॉट कंट्रीब्यूटिंग टू हैप्पीनेस एज अ पर्सनल प्रोजेक्ट. 1970 से दी स्टिग्मा दैट हैज और दी थिंग दैट हैज बीन टोल्ड टू पीपल दैट यू आर रिस्पॉन्सिबल फॉर योर ओन हैप्पीनेस, दैट इज मेकिंग हैप्पीनेस अ पर्सनल प्रोजेक्ट. वेरिएबल टेक्नोलॉजीज नहीं बता रहे. सो मेकिंग इंडिविजुअल्स अवेयर ऑफ द स्ट्रेस इन देयर लाइफ द डायरेक्ट कॉन्सिक्वेंस एकदम ब्लेटेंटली बताया गया है. कैट क्यों देना है? क्योंकि मेरे को आईआईएम में जाना है. बट कैट क्यों देना है? मुझे एमबीए करना है, कंपनी के लीडरशिप रोल में जाना है. दैट इज ऑप्शन सी. डिसिप्लिनिंग इंडिविजुअल्स टू बी हैप्पी, राइट. उसका कॉन्सिक्वेंस इज डिसिप्लिनिंग इंडिविजुअल्स टू बी हैप्पी. सो आउट ऑफ दीज टू अगेन आई विल नॉट बी I will not feel bad if you have marked A as the answer, chalega. But the correct answer here is option C. Aditya, spelling mistake will not cut marks. मतलब you can't make spelling mistakes. You have to just select the options. तो उसमें कुछ typing वाला part नहीं है. Right? Next question देख लेते हैं. In the author's opinion, the shift in thinking in the 1970s. वही देखा था 1970s में what happened? Happiness was attributed or depression was attributed at an individual level and not the circumstances. That was the problem in the 1970s. Put people in touch with their own feelings rather than depending on psychologists. So that is one thing. In a way, yes, put people in touch with their own feelings नहीं बोला, made people responsible for their own feelings बोला. But ठीक है, maybe you can say rather than depending on psychologists तो बिल्कुल नहीं बोला गया. Was a welcome change from the earlier view that depression could be cured by changing circumstances. Was a welcome change to definitely not what the author is saying, right? Welcome change is something that the author is for, but the author is definitely not for this particular thing. The author is against this thing that is happening. Introduce greater stress into people's lives as they were expected to be responsible for their own happiness. Beautifully done, right? Responsible for their own happiness. It's very, very, very nicely mentioned in the passage. So this is obviously much better than the first two options that we have seen. Reflected the emergence of neuroscience as the authority on human emotions. Neuroscience की बात नहीं कर. When we are talking about 1970s, we are talking about people being responsible for their own happiness. And अगर तुम happy नहीं हो तो that is because there is a problem with you and not the circumstances. That was an issue, right? So option C is the correct answer. This was one of the easier questions of this passage. Question 4. The author's view would be undermined by which of the following research findings? Author का view क्या है? Author का view है that stress can be measured, monitored, people are being disciplined, and happiness के parameters जो है उनको थोड़ा बड़ा करना चाहिए. Happiness parameters need to be removed. चलो, ठीक है? That is the author का point, right? Now author का view would be undermined by which of the following research findings? Stakeholders globally are moving away from collecting data on the well-being of individuals. If you look at this one, stakeholders are not globally moving away. In fact, a lot of people are using a lot of different ways to measure more or have more indicators, make it more quantifiable कि happiness है कि नहीं करके. तो अगर ये हो जाता है तो ऑथर का व्यू तो अंडरमाइन हो जाएगा. ऑथर का व्यू क्या है? दैट एवरीबडी इज ट्राइंग टू लुक एट डेटा, एवरीबडी इज ट्राइंग टू क्वांटिफाई थिंग्स, एवरीबडी इज ट्राइंग टू टेक एज मच एज इज पॉसिबल फ्रॉम यू एंड देन ट्राइंग टू चेंज थिंग्स अ बिट. ये सब चीजें हो रही हैं, राइट? बट यहाँ पे बोल रहे हैं कि स्टेक होल्डर्स आर मूविंग अवे फ्रॉम कलेक्टिंग डेटा. तो ये तो डेफिनेटली इज ऑपोजिट ऑफ व्हाट द ऑथर इज ट्राइंग टू से. तो ये अंडरमाइन करेगा. यस, लेट्स लुक एट द अदर ऑप्शंस एंड सी इफ देयर इज अ बेटर वन. There is a definitive move towards the adoption of wearable technology that taps into emotions. Yes. तो यहाँ पे अंडरमाइन नहीं हो रहा. यहाँ पे हम बोल रहे हैं कि भाई वेरिएबल टेक्नोलॉजी और भी ज्यादा encourage किया जा रहा है, right? They are encouraging it even more, and that's why people will be able to measure more things. This is definitely what the author will agree to. A proliferation of gyms that are collecting data on customer well-being. Again, people are being disciplined, stress can be measured, things can be measured, data is important. Again, ये बराबर बोल रहा है वही चीज. Individuals worldwide are utilizing technologies to monitor and increase their well-being. Again, they are using technology to increase and monitor their well-being. तो exactly वैसे का वैसा यहाँ पे लिखा है. So the author will basically be in trouble अगर अचानक से एक information आ जाता है कि भाई हम डेटा ही नहीं चाहिए हमको किसी. As soon as there is a news in the market that one company has stopped using data altogether for research, then the author का view is in trouble because now तो data use नहीं कर रहे हैं happiness के, right? Then the author has no reason to write this particular passage. So author का view would be undermined if there is a situation which would have led to the author not writing this passage at all, right? So that is basically the issue. All right. Okay. I hope I'm still audible and visible because suddenly my camera has frozen. That's why I just want to check once. If you are able to hear me, look at if the stream is still fine, let me know. Or otherwise, I'll have to do something else. Yeah, I think it should be better now. All right, my camera got frozen, I think, but otherwise we should be good. All right, so let's look at the next one. Let's look at the last question. According to the author, Dubai does what? Dubai collaborates with Facebook to selectively influence its inhabitants' moods? No. So Dubai has placed these cameras in public places which capture your emotions and then try to decode how you are feeling, right? So that is basically the thing. So collaborates with Facebook to definitely nahi hai. Develops sophisticated technologies to monitor its inhabitants' states of mind. So definitely yes, it has developed sophisticated technologies जिससे they can capture what exactly is going on in your mind. So this is definitely something that makes sense. Is on its way to becoming one of world's happiest cities. Not really. बोला गया है कि they aspire to become the happiest city, but otherwise nothing else. Incentivizes companies that prioritize worker welfare. Definitely not. So the correct answer is option B, which is obviously the right answer in this case. So यहाँ पे I will say that two questions were the ones that were manageable. Question 5 was definitely easy, manageable. Question 3 was definitely easy and manageable, I believe. Yeah. So दो questions manageable थे. ये वाला भी 4 and 5 चलो were manageable. Otherwise the questions were थोड़ा difficult to answer. Right? So that was basically the second passage that we had. First paragraph जो था, first passage जो था, that was still more manageable. There were a lot of questions, at least 3 or 4 questions, जहाँ पे the options were so far apart that you would not have missed it, right? Unless you overthought of something and you thought that नहीं और difficult होना चाहिए करके. Otherwise, you would not have missed out on that one. So यहाँ पे I would say that if you get 6 correct, 5 wrong kind of a thing, even if you are getting say 12, 13 marks out of the 33 marks that were there on offer, I think it's a decent enough job at this point in time. Okay? So if you have scored that many, it's okay. Don't worry about it. It's perfectly all right. Okay, so if there are no doubts, I think we'll close the session now. Tomorrow's session is going to be on modern math, I believe. So again, as usual, the test will be live tonight rather, at around 10ish, and you can take it at any point in time throughout the day tomorrow as well, or even after that, and we will discuss the solutions that are there. We are planning a surprise, as I mentioned yesterday as well. We are planning a surprise session on Sunday. We'll come up with the official communication on Friday regarding Sunday session, but make sure that you are free on Sunday morning 11 a.m. Right, so that is when I will see you for the special session. Tomorrow's session is going to be at 8 p.m. and we'll look at modern maths tomorrow. All right. So thank you everyone for turning up for this session. Thank you Argo Dipto. I hope all of you learned a lot more in today's session. One RC technique is what we discussed today. So have a look at it and maybe it might be useful to you. It's not very useful to me, but I'm sure it might be useful to some of you. All right. So on that note, we'll close the session now. Thank you everyone for turning up, and I'll see you again tomorrow.